Okay, so now you continue now with the roundtable, and I want to thank, because we invited some of the members of the advisory board of the Cresting project to be here with us and share some important of their thoughts and knowledge within this team we call Leadership in Circular Economy, the role of public sector versus private sector. Just a brief presentation for the ones that were not here yesterday. Carmen Jackie is a researcher and a lecturer at Tecnun Engineering School at University of Navarra in Spain. She's at the moment the academic coordinator of the Industrial Management degree and member of Quality Insurance Commission in Tecnun, that university. And her main research is focused on application of circular economy by small, medium enterprises through circular strategies and sustainable business models on sustainable innovation and employee engagement through involvement in sustainability. And thank you, Carmen, for being here and sharing these moments now. We also have Dr. Walter Stauel, which is the founder director of the Product Life Institute in Switzerland, which is the oldest established consultant in Europe, devoted to developing sustainable strategies in policies. Dr. Walter has been working a lot in circular economy, promoting and understanding of the structure of an economy in loops and its drivers and obstacles, in particular circular industrial economy, and spreading his knowledge about the competitiveness of a performing economy, selling goods and molecules as a service, and he's been writing several books to help us understand these issues. Thank you for being here and accepting the invitation to be with us, also sharing your great knowledge. We also have Henry Houdens, which has been since beginning of his professional life linked with central government, starting with advising the agriculture sector on technical and business management issues. And since 2014, he has been working in the statistics team within the wider resources and waste evidence team in DEFRA. And his main areas include resource efficiency, circular economy, data issues generally, including litter, commissioning research, industrial and academia engagement. So as a start of the roundtable, I will ask each one of them to give us their thoughts within 5 to 10 minutes each one, because I think there is a lot of things so we could discuss within the leadership in circular economy of public versus private sector. And yesterday and today we have been talking about several issues that will be important for this discussion. We have been talking about business innovation, integrated approaches, development of frameworks to support decision maker, systematic thinking, do-think, collaboration, performance assessment. So there is a lot of issues that are good to discuss within this great team. So please, maybe Dr. Carmen, you'd like to start? Is that okay, since you have a formal presentation, and then go to the others? My presentation? Yes, of course. Of course, of course.
I'm going to present the case of the Basque country and the public, how the public sector is acting in the Basque country and how it's promoting the circular economy among or with the companies. Okay, so Basque country is a region. It's a small region, as you can see. It's only 2 million inhabitants, and we have a reduced square kilometers. And comparing with Spain, it's small, but our contribution is important. For example, we have more than 10% of industrial GDP in Spain. I could like to show this because this is our situation as a region, and this is the reason because we need the circular economy. We import most of our materials, most of the fossil fuels, well, not most, all of the fossil fuels, metallic minerals. We in our origin were producers of metallic or extractors of metallic. We don't have any more metallic minerals, and we only have 11 millions of tons of imports that are basic non-metallic minerals and biomass. So we extract a lot of material, we don't extract, we import a lot of materials and we export a lot. So our economy is not sustainable, more sustainable. So we need the circular economy to keep with our activity. So I will show two ideas how the Basque government is going or is promoting the circular economy in our region. The Basque government has an instrument that is e.Learning. e.Learning is a public-owned company, but is independent from the Basque government. So the aim of e.Learning is supports the Basque government in the implementation of environmental policies. How e.Learning is working? e.Learning has different areas of work, of interest, of course, water, air, waste, climate change, and also the circular economy area. e.Learning has different tools to help companies, and not only companies, also to cities in their way for the sustainability. For example, during the last year, e.Learning has helped to companies in different projects to recover waste or residuals as raw material. Here you can see examples from sector of paper, construction, plastic also, and e.Learning has a very specific plan. The plan is with fundings from European Commission that they get the fundings and they help companies with about 20,000 euros for each project. It's not much money, but it's enough to support the company to test, to develop the idea first and then to test the idea. And they have some specific criteria that are environmental relevance, technical knowledge, viability, economical viability, the public role in the market, and if the solution is available. Just two ideas. The circular economy strategy is developed in a mission, vision, and values. The values are sustainability, innovation, efficiency, engagement, and cooperation. And they have first developed a map of the opportunities in our region. The e.Learning has detected or has established 5 areas of opportunities that are eco-design, remanufacturing, servitization, plastic, composites, and rubber, and key metals. And then they have deployed the different sectors, value chain, and life cycle stage. And they have detected which are the opportunities and areas that are more important or more relevant in this moment. For example, the end of life is something that is very important for our area, and it impacts in all the different opportunities. With this diagnosis, they have developed 10 points sub-strategies. For example, related with competitiveness and innovation, we have 3: new circular business model, innovation, new sustainable materials, and in the 4 areas that are production, consumption, and waste management, we have different topics to work on. This is a plan for 2025. So IOBE is going to use the instruments that until now have used also. One that is very important, I think, is the green public procurement. They have established some criteria, and they applied that criteria in IOBE and in other government departments. They have developed a list of technical and environmental standards to help companies and to help different companies and organizations. They also manage the environmental authorizations. This is important because 20 years ago, for example, some companies, yes, not a lot, but some companies, they didn't get the environmental authorizations because the law had changed and they didn't get the new laws. And so IOBE supporting the companies to reach that legal standards. They have also managed the tax deduction for some investment. For example, there is a help to companies that buy electrical cars, so they can avoid this difference in the price of a car. And also they help companies with some fundings from European projects to develop economy demonstration projects or eco-design projects or eco-innovation projects. Some examples and results from previous years are here. More than 150 companies in Basque Country are already applying the principles of life cycle thinking because the IOBE have developed an eco-lab to support and to train this type of companies. We have 5% of this certification is from the Basque government of the Basque Country, is from Basque Country companies. We have more than 30 products certified with this certification. We have an amount of products with eco-label certification also, more than 100, that is an amount of. And IOBE have developed eco-design guides also. And finally, I am going to show you two examples of two companies in our region. One is Coopera. Coopera is a social network of cooperatives for the insertion of people in situation of risk of social exclusion. They collect unused clothing from citizens in big containers. They collect these clothes, and if the clothes are useful, they sell these clothes. And other ways, they have developed a project to recover and recycling the fibers. So they applied one of these fundings from IOBE to develop a system to, with a machine to separate the organic fibers from the polyester fibers. So they can recover the fibers and sell to another company to produce another textiles. This is another company called Ternua with two projects that is related also with the circular economy. One is Euskal Sareak. They recover the fishing nets that are useless, and they produce the fiber to do this type of clothes. And the other is they recover the shell nuts. We have in the Basque Country a tradition that is the sidrerias. It's like restaurants that we eat meat, and the final, I don't know, the postre, the final dish, dessert, thank you, the dessert is nut. So we have a lot of nut shells. So this company have collect the nut shells from this type of restaurants, and they produce ink for textile. and they have produced a brand, or it's not a brand, a line of the clothes that is inked with this type of material. So I wanted to show with my presentation that the public organisms are very important because they can help to the private companies in different ways. One of the way is, as you can see, with specific projects that are able to show to citizens and to other companies how to apply the principles of this circular economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. A very good example was being happening in the Basque Country, and the links between the public policies, the strategies, and good examples to engage the private sector in this issue. So maybe, would you mind, Andrew, to share with us some thoughts about this, please?
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, we face many of the similar issues. So I work within Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, which covers quite a wide canvas of topics. And within that, I sit in the Environmental Quality Directorate within DEFRA, working mainly with the resource efficiency and circular economy teams. I think it's fair to say that our leadership from government is really through a mix of current policies. So, for example, landfill tax, producer responsibility, paying for increased rates of plastic packaging, recycling infrastructure, for example. But there's scope to do more. So just before Christmas last year, we published our first ever, I think, resource and waste strategy. Yet another strategy, but have to start somewhere. And that contained lots of policy proposals and commitments. I think there were something like 100 commitments within the strategy. But where we would like to go, and waste policy is devolved in the UK, so England has its own, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland too. We are thinking very seriously about deposit return schemes, for example, getting more consistency in waste collection. So we have a lot of, for example, in our cities, understandably quite transient populations, and within one local authority, one part of London, for example, they might have a completely different recycling regime to the neighbouring part. So that can cause a lot of confusion amongst residents. We have a very multicultural society with lots of different languages, again, in urban areas. So there's a real challenge there for making it easier for people to do the right thing in terms of increased circularity, not least the general public. And I think the government in England can play a very key role there in terms of leadership. Waste, circular economy is a very high profile subject in our country. When we went out to consultation on those three policies, deposit return schemes, producer responsibility and consistency of collection, we had thousands and thousands of responses from the public, and other stakeholders, which really did surprise even some of us who work at the sharp end of things. But as ever, none of this is easy, and the human engagement element is so challenging, but so important in terms of including making it easier for people to help circularity. Very much aware of those issues of to what extent does carbon neutrality overlap with circularity, and making the most of natural capital, and resource efficiency. How on earth do you juggle these to maintain that perfect balance, which was what we heard in the earlier presentation, one of the earlier presentations. It's very, very difficult. Hopefully, to a large extent, there's a lot of overlap between those things, but yes, we can't chase circularity as the be-all and end-all. We can't chase carbon abatement as the be-all and end-all. There's got to be a reconciliation between those. And I think we've also got the challenges of where the private sector can certainly help. So we've got examples of this with collaboration with government. So I hold regular meetings with waste management companies to see what data we can share, because good data is a very basic thing, but it's in everyone's interest, the private sector and the governments. So we rely on the private sector to give us, for example, their thoughts on what our official statistics are looking like. Are they credible? Could they be improved? And again, because we're kind of all in this together, they help where they can to make sure that our statistics are sort of sense checked by them. And we are looking to establish a national materials database. This is something we've never done before, and it'll be an extremely granular database, and we'll rely a lot on private sector help here. But again, the idea is that the private sector at a very micro level can really benefit from having much better information about what resources out there, particularly secondary materials. And at a higher level, government can make better policy decisions if it has good data on that. But that's going to be a very long project to get off the ground, but so far several £1 million has been promised to help, in our case, the Office for National Statistics, to develop that. But I can't stress enough how much it will rely on collaboration with the private sector, including them being willing to give data that they wouldn't have normally been willing to give. Another issue that we're painfully well aware of is resource scarcity. So we're in many ways an increasingly uncertain world that we're living in, and we're well aware of the how economies around the world. China's a very good example. Can be so important when it comes to sourcing, for example, rare earth elements, which are used in, for example, in electronics, etc., where the recycling rates are pitifully low. I think something like 1% of these things gets recycled. Why? Well, one of the problems is that, again, this is the power of the linear economy. Countries like China, perhaps particularly China, can dig these things out of the ground on such a massive scale that their price rise, the prices are kept low, and it's very difficult for recycled material to compete with that. And of course, it's not just England that faces those sort of challenges. So that's just a flavour of the challenges we face, and where I think we can show some leadership. But it's particular, my angle, a lot of that is on data, better information, because on that basis we can work with industry to help sort things out and have a better chance to get where we want to be. But none of this is easy.
Thank you. You'll get 3 very different presentations, and you'll have to make your own mix and find out what the common denominators are. So I focus on special resources. There are 2 special resources. One is water, because it's the only resource for which there is no alternative. And the other one is labor, because it's the only resource with the qualitative edge. In other words, we can, through education and training, we can improve the quality of labor, but skills But if we don't use then these skills, if people are unemployed, they will rapidly lose these skills and in the end become unemployable. So the conclusion from those two things is that we have to be much more aware where hidden water reserves are, and that we have an ethical imperative to use labor preferentially to any other resource. Coming back to Fritz Schumacher and economics as if people mattered. I sometimes say if you leave a ton of oil or coal another 10 years in the soil, it will not change. If you don't employ people for 10 years, unfortunately, they will have lost their value. And so we have to maintain this value. Now, materials, we normally talk about visible materials, like urban mining that Andrew mentioned. But the invisible, I'm much more interested by the invisible materials that are embodied in existing stocks of infrastructure, buildings, objects, and it's mainly embodied water, embodied CO2, embodied energy. Now, if you take a pair of jeans and you think about these embodied resources, in a pair of jeans you have 11 tons of water that you cannot see, but that were necessary to produce the cotton and then the jean. So if you repair a pair of jeans or simply keep wearing it for another service life, even if it's got holes and whatever, you actually preserve 11 tons of water. If you dismantle a pair of jeans, in other words, you recover the cotton fiber, you still preserve 10 tons of water that were necessary to grow the cotton. But nobody knows about these things, and they are not, there's no eco-label that tells you these things. The same thing with the concrete building. Concrete needs a lot of energy to produce cement and a lot of water to produce concrete, and a lot of sand that has to be sea sand, which is becoming rare. But when we talk about recycled concrete, we actually we demolish, we cut the existing concrete into small bits to produce aggregate. But aggregate is the only thing that is not rare, because we cannot recover the cement and we cannot recover the sand. So we have to be very careful if we look at the circular economy, we have to understand first what goes in and then see how we can preserve this. So service life extension of product enables to preserve all these embodied water, CO2, and energies. Now, talking about policy makers, the role of policy. One of the key elements looking at the other resource, labor, is that all caring activities, which means education, health services, looking after natural capital, forests, for example, cultural capital, all these caring activities are labor intensive. They like circular economy, like repairing and remanufacturing. So Ines this morning showed you that we tax labor by 50%, but we tax emissions and resources by less than 1%. So an obvious way to promote circular economy is let's stop taxing labor. Let's tax things we don't want, waste, emissions, but we shouldn't tax things that we do want to promote, such as labor. And then there is another basic issue. Labor is a renewable resource, as Ines also correctly mentioned, and we basically should not tax renewable resources, we should tax non-renewable resources if we want to go to a sustainable development. So taxation is a very important lever of policy makers. Then VAT, value-added tax, is a very important also income for states. But the problem is that circular economy activities are not value-added. It's maintaining value. Value maintained should not be taxed with VAT. And if you do that, then you immediately make service life extension activities about 25% cheaper than new products. The only country that so far has done this do not tax labor in repair activities and reduce VAT in service life extension activities is Sweden. It's very funny that normally people don't look at Sweden as the leading environmentally or sustainable economy, but on this immaterial side, it's actually probably the leading country. And then the last thing that policymakers can do, or public authorities, is public procurement. In most public procurement, companies or municipalities, public authorities have to buy new goods. They are not allowed to buy second-hand goods because we still associate second-hand goods with secondary quality. And yet we can show that we have a number of remanufactured goods that are as good as new, or some are even better than new. So public procurement should state the performance that the good or the objective has to deliver, not what it is made of. And I'll give you one example, one striking example that completely changed an industry. When NASA, the American Space Administration, 10 years ago decided to get out of the space shuttle program, they put on their website, and it's still there, that the preferred procurement is services, not hardware. And the result of that was that you had some mad people like Elon Musk and what's the chap of Amazon, the owner of Amazon, who then immediately realized this is a new area to make money. And today, SpaceX, the company of Elon Musk, and Odyssey Moon, the company of the other guy from Amazon, are the leading providers of space services. And to do that, they both have developed a reusable rocket. A rocket that takes off and lands on propulsion, whereas the old companies, General Dynamics and Boeing, that used to provide the big Atlas and whatever rockets, they have gone out of the business. Because if you have a reusable rocket, nobody can compete price-wise with your services. Because if you have a rocket that you can only use once, you are by definition much more expensive. But the whole thing was promoted or was triggered by NASA saying, we want to buy space services. We no longer buy rockets or space shuttles. So this procurement that you specify performance and not goods is absolutely crucial if you want to speed up the change to another economy. And similarly, you should say you want to purchase chairs that are guaranteed for 10 years, including repairs and everything, and not specify you want to buy the cheapest new chairs on the market, which today is there. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. I think we have already several important issues on the table. So we now can move for the questions. Okay. So Enrique, want to start?
Thank you. That was really interesting. And my question is, you tackled it a bit, but I still want to ask it. You were talking about taxation, and I was wondering if there are other forms of regulation that the public sector should impose on the private sector, like prohibit things that you think would drive the circular economy, and if yes, what kind of other types of regulation rather than taxation, for example, would that be?
Yes, yes.
Well, one obvious regulation is because you can show that basically products, is it working? Products live as long as they are not fully depreciated. So a computer is depreciated over 3 years, and normally they live about that long. Cars are depreciated over 5 years. Company cars, that's about as long as they live. Aircraft are depreciated over 15 years, and most aircraft live 17 to 20 years. Despite the fact that a car is a much simpler technology than an aircraft. But basically, you cannot afford to get rid of a product that you haven't fully depreciated. And so therefore the tax depreciation period is a major and completely neglected way of pushing manufacturers to produce long life goods, because an aircraft actually has a manufacturer's guarantee of 18 years, because otherwise an airline doesn't buy an aircraft where the manufacturer guarantee is shorter than the depreciation period. So there is a close link. There was 20 years ago, the US Congress had the idea to allow depreciation below zero, which would be another way to do it. But these instruments are normally not really used in practice.
Any of you would like to add something on this, or move to the next one?
No, just to agree that anything we can do to make people buy for longevity, and so that things aren't replaced any sooner than they absolutely have to be, ideally aren't replaced at all, we're moving more to a space where we need to be.
Okay. So, okay, we have here more questions. I don't know which ladies first.
Thank you. So I have a question about, well, what was said about labor being a resource, but in a broad way of looking at it, it's the human kind. So people are the center of the world, of our world. We cannot move from this perspective. So, I mean, circular economy, of course, it's a very interesting concept. But even if we can, as all humanity, can move to this idea of efficiency, of exploring resources, and everything is very well done. So, even so, if you think of sustainability, we need something more. We need some ethic view, some, I mean, spiritual view, religious view, what, I don't know, whatever you can. There are things that money cannot pay, as a famous author says. So what's missing here to, to get, to move from just a concept, it's a technical concept, if you want, of circular economy, to sustainability for a human being and maybe to happiness, whatever you define it. What's your comments about that?
Who wants to give first thought?
Okay, coming back again to Ines' presentation, sustainability is a holistic concept, but all our administrations and corporate structures and universities are organized in silos. And for questions of efficiency and control, these silos are isolated. And one of the biggest challenges is to break out of these silos and start to think in a holistic way. But then, as you have said, we need a value concept. We need philosophers. We need other people than are involved today in the discussion. And then we have to find out what is because the objective of sustainability is basically happiness or quality of life. And then you realize that we are moving into an area, a qualitative area, that will differ from one country, from one region to another, even from one person to another. And then, of course, we have a big problem of how we measure this and how we promote this, and we are back to the basically philosophical problem that we only measure what can be measured and what is visible. And before it was religion that gave us these other objectives or visions or values. Now religion is more or less dead in many areas, but we don't have a replacement value to define what is happiness or satisfaction. Or, do you want to?
Okay. In line that with your comments, I would like to say that for me, the circular economy have several pillars. Two of the pillars are think in systems. I think that one of the problems is in the past and now in the present is that we are focused in silos and in the process, if our process was the only process of the company or of the region, and we need to think in the overall system. And another thing related with people is we have to take advantage of the diversity. So the diversity is other pillar for the circular economy, as we are more diverse, we will be more resilient. And in the past, we were very focused on standardization, and the standards were the way to be more efficient. But it was because we were thinking in local, because the standard is good to produce a lot of pieces in the same way and with the same characteristics. But this is not efficient at all, because we are all diverse and we are different. We have different necessities and different characteristics. And I think that circular economy is an opportunity to think all the system in a different way, and to take advantage of different ways of thinking of the different people. And I think that this is very valuable.
You want to add something? No? Okay. So, Andy, please.
Is that on? Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think this question is a follow-up to, and it's very interesting to have a presentation on the Basque region, because you've had a very interesting enterprise structure in your companies, your cooperatives, like the Mondragon Cooperative. And I was wondering whether the circular economy makes you rethink the benefits of that kind of a corporate structure, or a cooperative structure. For example, as you say, you need to think in terms of systems, whereas I think that my understanding of the Mondragon Cooperative, it was organized more in terms of different sectors. So would you say that the Basque region is a good model to follow in terms of organizational structure of ownership of enterprise, or do you face unique challenges in adopting the circular economy because of your legacy of a different way of organizing enterprises?
The Mondragon case is a very particular case. Is a way of organization that every worker is the owner of the company, and every worker have the same, I don't know, rights or the same participation in the company. So this is not a magical recipe. This type of companies have also the problems, but the good thing, I think, is that they help each other, as they are part of a group. When a company have a problem, they support each other, and this is a good way. In particular, in our university, we have some contacts with this type of companies, and we have a project with the Mondragon. There are another university that is Mondragon University. We are in contact with Mondragon University. We are developing a project in circular economy with this university and with the cooperative companies, and is focused in industrial symbiosis, because that is an advantage, that they are very good related between them, the companies, and also they are working a lot in remanufacturing, because they come from a very industrialized sector and very focused, or they work also a lot in machinery. So the remanufacturing is a good option for them. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. You want to add something? Yeah, yeah. You want?
A circular economy is basically a regional economy, especially a circular economy of objects, but even of materials. Once we have the mini-mill technologies to recover molecules, but certainly the objects, reuse and remarket objects, Internet is an incredible tool to facilitate reuse and remarket reselling objects, because you can put it on eBay or any other platform and somebody may buy it who you never knew he existed or where he existed. And the same thing for repairs. I don't know if you know ifixit.com. There are now more and more people, including websites, that provide you information on where you can find the tools and the spare parts to repair something. And if circular economy is a regional economy, that means that you will have many SME, small and medium-sized enterprises, workshops, and for those SMEs, it's a big help, Internet, if they can find the tools and the parts, spare parts they need to repair things. Because their knowledge is much broader. And I can tell you that I have a 50-year-old English car, and you know the British are a bit special, so they love these old cars. But if you want for an MG or a Jaguar or any major make spare parts, you simply go on the internet and you can order any spare part on the internet for your car. It will be delivered, and that allows a lot of people to make better use of the stock of objects they have when they break down. But these tools are sometimes not very well publicized, because all the insiders know where to find the knowledge. But it may be also in the Basque Country one thing to give an education on where SMEs can find the information they need to repair more efficiently goods.
Thank you. More questions? Okay. This one. Yeah.
Thinking, I don't know, what do you think it's the circular economy and the growth? I don't know, because like we were talking about, we need a cultural change and like a mind shift in our society. So if you live in a system like a linear economy system, and you want to shift to a circular economy, we need our society minds to change. So nowadays we think in economy growth and in consumption, so it is. So maybe the growth as a, I don't know, a connection with circular economy. What are your thoughts about it? I don't know. I was thinking about that, and for like happiness, because degrowth has like a aspect about happiness, so maybe it has a connection. Thank you.
Yes, it's a big challenge. It does require a fundamental shift in the way people think about things. Hopefully younger people who are particularly environmentally conscious will help drive that forward. I think it goes back to the points Walter was making about services, about shifting from a culture of ownership, I guess, to shared ownership, I mean, taking an extreme, textiles, and Walter explained the natural capital effects of making brand new clothing. Then there are already, I think, companies increasingly getting interested in providing clothing as a service. So you would literally rent a pair of jeans. But that company who owns the jeans would then be responsible for repairing them, if that's possible, when they get to the end of life, or at least making sure that there's as much circularity maintained as possible. I'm not absolutely convinced that can work, but we've got to really try these things. And I think textiles is really, I mean, plastics has been a big headache, but I think textiles is one that's already a headache, but is fast becoming another headache because of the trends for fashion, for people to, again, I guess we're back to the power of the linear economy, but for people, the constant bombardment with, with fashion changes, etc. So there's really a role for all sections of society to take a lead here, including, of course, the more sort of celebrity end of things, the famous people perhaps who drive this constant churn in fashion tastes, etc. Just to think more about textiles there. But it might be a shift that suddenly comes. It's although it can seem a really uphill struggle to get this mind shift now, things can change very quickly. Human behavior can change very quickly. And again, I suppose it's an example how we've got to rely on the private sector helping us to get there. And it will. If it sees opportunities, it will go in there. And I know that sometimes we have reservations about the motives of the private sector, and that's another thing that we've got to, I think, come to terms with. And we mustn't, where it is genuinely helping circularity, we mustn't sort of push it to one side just because it's coming from the private sector.
We have to be very careful because the circular economy is as old as mankind, but it was a circular economy of scarcity, of poverty, of necessity, which still exists in many areas in India, Africa, South America, and which is exemplified by the old proverbial expression, use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. And you can ask, there are some people here there's one gentleman from Nepal, and there are probably other people. In many areas, this circular economy of necessity still exists. So when we moved into mass production, into surplus, a society of abundance. And now in these societies of abundance, if we want to develop a circular economy, we need to motivate people. If you don't have enough things, you don't need the motivation. If you live in a surplus abundance, then why should you not buy a new smartphone or a new T-shirt, and so that's where either it's self-motivation, such as these Friday for Future movements. There are other movements, vegan, which basically move away from the from the consumer society, or then we have to educate, we have to inform, we have to push through taxation. There are different ways, but in a society of abundance, you need to give people a motivation to shift to a circular economy.
I would like to say that it's so necessary to illusionate people with this movement. We are lucky because now the young generations are illusionated and they are fighting because they know that it's future that is on the game. But it's important to communicate also that we are achieving I think that every little thing that we are doing in this line is important to communicate, because there are a lot of people that are not thinking or that are not aware of this type of, like the jeans, the pair of jeans, the lot of resources that are necessary to do or to produce things that are not necessary at all for us. So it's important to communicate, to illusionate people, and to go in this path. I absolutely convinced.
Thank you. Oh. We are short in time because, unfortunately, Dr. Walter needs to leave at 11:30. So please summarize your question in just 1 or 2 words, if possible. If possible, not easy. And then we'll move to a last round. But please join this final question. Otherwise, I'll pass to the other ones.
My question is about, we're talking about cultural change, and a lot of people are aware about that things need to change. What can the public sector do to actually make people act on it, the private and the private sector and citizens?
Yeah, before you were saying that circular economy is a regional economy, and yeah, I'm wondering that is in line with the principles, the economic principles of comparative advantage and economics of scale, which is also a reality that we have today.
Yeah, my question is quite quick. Would kind of get rid of private property generate like a sustainable circular economy?
I would like to do a connection between 2 cases that you cited before. The 20 years old car and the second hand of third hand used textile. About cars, on one end, we should repair, use spare part to make the life longer. But on the other side, we know that there are new technologies that allow to make the cars safer. So there is a basic quality requirements that we have to consider to make safer our cars and to put at the center the human well-being. On the other side, we should use second-hand, third-hand textile, but we also see that in a circular economy perspective, we have companies that are using waste materials to have new textile and to produce new clothes. So how can we draw a boundary, which should be the focus because the risk is not to take different direction and not to reach our common goal.
So a new challenge, how to answer these 4 complicated answers in a short time, but hopefully you can handle it easily. So who wants to start? Okay. In the middle, maybe. Okay.
Okay, on what can the public sector do to promote circular economy? Well, I suppose it starts with basic things, so making sure that the IT equipment they use is refurbished and repaired, not brand new as much as that's possible. It means it's up to the politicians to put messages out there as well about how important it should be to promote circularity, so to cite good best practice with circularity. And they can do that for their own departments where there are examples of departments getting away from the brand new instead of used, ownership, sharing instead of ownership, the more service-based. And I think things have been done, but there's still room for improvement. For the other questions, I'll perhaps hand over to Walter and Carmen and come back in maybe later. Thanks.
Let's start with the old cars. I have 2 cars from 1969, and they are both equipped with modern safety belts, because it's very easy to fix a safety belt on an existing car. Now, if I crash this car into an object, into a solid object, which I've never done in 50 years, so I'm not sure why I should do it now, because you are driving carefully if you are driving in an old car. You are no longer getting in races and things like this. But if I crash the car into a solid object, then I would be better off in a modern car. But if I crash it into a modern car in a head-on collision, then I'm much better off in my car, because my car has no what do you call this, zone of compression. The other car, the modern car, will have to take all the beating, all the crash, because my car is not giving way. So, you know, as always, on one hand, on the other hand, now regional economy versus economy of scale. A circular economy will always have a multitude of different objects, different makes, different ages. So you cannot, in repair business, you cannot achieve an economy of scale. But the repair business is 80% labor, and 20% of the repair bill is spare parts or taxes or whatever. But the majority of the cost is labor, and so therefore the savings you have, that the economy of scale saves on labor, repair activities save on materials and energy. And so you are still, I can give you remanufacturing, because this is a well-researched topic. A remanufactured Caterpillar engine, as good as new, is 40% cheaper than a new one. And because you use very little material. So it's a different economy, the circular economy.
I'm going to try to be short. Regarding the public sector, I think that the public sector have the confidence of the citizens to do things, and also the money of the city, from the citizens. So it's a superpower, and also it's a challenge. So in my country, I see that we are lucky because in environmental department, there are people that are very compromised with circular economy and this type of things. So they support the new projects, and this is very big for us and very helpful. So for me, this is the role that the public sector should have. About the private ownership, I think that, as I have said before, the diversity is important and is in the world. So some people don't have to be owner of anything, but other people like to have some specific things. So it's not important to have all in ownership. Some things can be shared, and other anyone have the right to keep for them. For example, I don't know, the pictures or a car that it's 20 years old. Why not? The important thing is that these things remain in the circle to maintain the value as long as possible. And finally, with the textile is a huge problem, but there are different ways to solve or try to solve. One is the production, how to produce this type of textile. We always will need clothes, but the good thing is that we have to find sustainable ways to produce the new clothes. And one good thing is that there are new projects that allow to recover the waste to do new things, new clothes. For example, the example of the fishing nets is a good example. And the other is what are going to do with the old clothes is a very big problem, and we should think about how to recover all these pieces of textile that are producing a lot of CO emissions also. Thank you.
Okay. So I don't know if you want to add something, or you okay? Okay. So we need to finish, since Holger has to take his taxi. And so if I may summarize, I think there is no doubt that there is a leadership for the public sector and the private sector. The public sector through the policies, through the strategies, through the change of taxes. The private sector, of course, in terms of new business models, there is a lot that companies and private companies there is a lot of challenges. But at the end, I think one of the most things that are still missing maybe is the education of the persons and the change of paradigm. Maybe we should look more for new ways of happiness. I think that's the main challenges that we still need to address. So I want to give a big applause for everyone, for the discussion and for the speakers. Thank you so much for sharing this moment with us.